This time on Thursdays, we have Frank Klose join us, talk about Phillies baseball. Who would have thought, Frank, that at the beginning of the season, on May 4th, the Phillies would have a better record than both the Phillies and the Braves?
Yeah, that's very surprising. I would have thought that the Mets would have given themselves a little bit more than they have now, but I think they got off to a rocky start with Joey Familia being on that restricted list, and they just never really seem to have recovered.
It's very interesting because you know how baseball is. It's such a fluctuating game. It constantly is changing. And for all the frustrations we have with the Phillies on this season, they're only 12-14. The Phillies actually have one of the better run differentials in the National League this year. I believe they're either 6th or 7th overall. So despite the frustrations we may have with the team overall, there's still +8 in runs scored versus runs against.
Yeah, I've said this to Mike Gill before, too. Like, in some ways, they're the quintessential 500 team. I see this as a team that's going to blow some games and look really ugly at times. And then there's other games that they're just going to steamroll over their opponents. So I think that's kind of something that could happen with a team like this. Now, you remember that huge first inning that they had against the Nationals. I think that's helping skew the numbers at this point. But I think, this team has enough talent that you won't see any majorly sustained losing streaks, but at the same time, they're going to have some winning streaks, and they're going to look really good. And then other times, like they did the last couple of days, they look pretty bad. So I think that's what you're going to get out of this team right now, is sort of a 500, some on the rise, not all the pieces in place just yet.
We've seen overall in the season the lineup take a few. It's morphed to a bit, Frank, because of the fact that you have Howie Kendrick get injured. You have a situation where you have different guys coming in and out of the lineup, not hitting well. When you look at the Phillies lineup as it's constituted right now, is this the best the Phillies can put forward, all things considered?
For now, maybe. The hard thing is Tommy Joseph is definitely underperforming. If you considered his numbers last year being projected over the full season, going into the season, but you really didn't know what Tommy Joseph was going to be as an everyday starter. Now, the Phillies last year with Ryan Howard there, they got to play some matchups. Now, a couple times last year we mentioned that the Phillies actually had more home runs out of the first base position than pretty much every other team. I don't remember what the final number was, but they were leading the pack towards the end. But Joseph never really played every day against lefties and righties in the major leagues. And on top of that, you have teams making adjustments to him. So if you're going to rely on Tommy Joseph to be in the middle of your lineup, then you had better make sure that he is capable of doing that. And in a lot of ways, this year the Phillies just had to find out. And right now the early returns aren't so great. He certainly has his moments. He still has his power if he can connect with the pitch. But it's a situation now where the opposition, they're in no hurry to throw him a pitch that he can hit out. So the middle of the lineup is kind of struggling there. Maikel Franco, you had hoped with Michael Saunders and with Tommy Joseph behind him that he would have a little bit more protection in the lineup. You would hope that Maikel Franco did a little better job with his pitch selection, something that kind of happens with experience. And he's kind of struggled a little bit, perhaps because of both things. So they've kind of let the Phillies down at this point, and we saw these last couple nights, and they're doing it again today. Odubel Herrera batting fifth, just trying to have some sort of offense behind those guys that get on base at the top. And the hard part is, too, that you're in a situation now where if Odubel Herrera's bounced back, if you can throw in Daniel Nava or Aaron Altherr to fill the gap, you try to do it. But remember, Odubel Herrera hasn't had his best year yet either. So,
Frank, one of the crazy things about this lineup is that you have 4 guys on the season who have 4 home runs. One is Maikel Franco, who, all right, we kind of expected that. But then the other 2 are Freddy Galvez and Cesar Hernandez. Is that more indicative of the lack of pop in the lineup than anything else?
Well, I think actually if you project that out, we're we're like 1 month in, multiply it by 5 to 6 times, and you have a good handful of home run hitters. Phillies actually had a lot of 20 home run hitters last year, Galvez being one of them. Now, Hernandez, he noticeably added some muscle this offseason, so maybe he's got a little bit more power than he did before. You kind of worry about that for players like Hernandez. If they add muscle, will it mess up their swing? So far, the answer seems to be no. But the Phillies had a good number of 20 home run hitters last year, and it's kind of interesting. The power numbers are kind of up on the rise around the league. Now, they have nobody that's set to hit 30, certainly. But, nobody really was projected to hit 30. I think they hoped Tommy Joseph would hit 30. But, so far, as we mentioned, he's struggled a little bit, and he's only got a couple. But, that's the number 4 there is decent if you're scattering it around the lineup. If really that projects out to 20. But you got to think Maikel Franco will pick it up a little bit as time goes on. And I know the Phillies are working with him to try to be a little bit more selective with his pitches, because he's somebody who probably could have a couple more at this point.
You're seeing how well Aaron Altherr is playing with Howie Kendrick out of the lineup. He's getting a lot more opportunities in pretty much every outfield position at this point. Is he a guy that you think for the rest of this season they're just going to have to find a place for him in the lineup no matter who is healthy or not?
Well, the fourth outfielder tends to get a lot of action anyway. I think if he's playing well, where he'll get those at-bats with everybody healthy, will be in right field on days where they're facing a left-handed pitcher. I think you can pretty much guarantee that Altherr will play against every lefty that he faces. But when you look at Altherr, he has the option to also, as we talked about earlier this week on the Sports Bash, Howie Kendrick might go play some first base because of Tommy Joseph's struggles. And if Kendrick is playing first base, well, that certainly opens up some playing time for Altherr and left. I think the Phillies will mix and match. I don't think that they're going to just take first base completely away from Joseph and say Howie Kendrick is going to play first base, period. But I think they're going to try to play the matchup so that Altherr does get in there. When they face definitely when they face lefties, you have an outfield with Odubel Herrera and Michael Saunders as your starters, both lefties, both who might want to get a day off now and then against a tough lefty. So I think what they're going to do is they're just going to play the matchups, get Daniel Nava in there as well, some too, because Nava's played well as well, and shown some good discipline and taking some walks, which has helped keeping his batting average up. So I think thanks to somebody like Kendrick, who was, in my opinion, a pretty nice pickup, you can throw him at first base, you can throw him in the outfield, you can even play him at second base or third base if you want to. It gives them a lot of options. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to try to find those spots for Altherr. I think they have no problem putting him in center, left, or right, and I think he's going to get plenty of playing time, even maybe a little bit more than the average fourth outfielder, especially with Kendrick's flexibility. And then if the day comes where perhaps they trade Michael Saunders or they trade Howie Kendrick, then he's got an everyday thing going.
We're talking with Frank Klose of Sports Talk Phillies, also our 97.3 ESPN.com Phillies Insider. Frank, flipping it over to the pitching situation, Jeremy Hellickson has been absolutely impressive. I think he has exceeded anyone's expectations. I remember years ago when he was talked about as a top prospect in the Tampa organization. Is what you're seeing from Jeremy Hellickson now in line with the expectations that were had for him about 3-4 years ago?
Well, we kind of burst out on the scene with that great rookie season, and I think when the league sort of adjusted to him, it took him a while to get going again, and then he had a couple injury issues. I think he still remains a very, very nice pitcher. I think with Jeremy Hellickson, you're going to see somebody who pitches rather efficiently. I don't think Pete Mackanin necessarily likes leaving him into the game too long. You notice a few times he's pulled Hellickson with a low pitch count. But I think he's a very, very nice pitcher to have, who probably in an ideal situation is a good team's number 3. You think of him like on the Dodgers behind somebody like Kershaw, leading the pack, and he's kind of there in the middle, pitching very, very well. So he's an interesting situation for the Phillies. I know they paid the qualifying offer of $17.2 million to bring him back for 1 year. They say in baseball there's no such thing as a bad one-year deal, and a lot of people felt that they overpaid for him dramatically for this 1 year. But right now he's giving the Phillies something they very need, which is some stability, some innings, and they know that when Hellickson takes the mound, they have a chance to win. I think the players feel like they have a chance to win on those days. And at the same time, I think the Phillies still want to be open to trading him at the trade deadline if they can. Certainly if he plays the way he does, he has been, although he did get roughed up a little bit the other night. Now, I think he's a very attractive pitcher for a team like the Dodgers, who might say, that they're struggling to get what they want out of some of their fourth and fifth starters. A playoff team might have three good starters. They want that fourth starter that can really stabilize things, like when the Phillies grabbed Joe Blanton to fill that role. So I think he's going to be in high demand, and I think there's a good chance he'll be traded. We learned later that last year that the Phillies almost traded him after a trade snafu with the Padres and Marlins sort of opened that door. So we know that there are teams out there willing to trade prospects for Hellickson, and he's done nothing to really change anybody's mind. So I thought that was a very good investment. All he cost the Phillies was money. They have no commitment after this year. And a team like the Phillies wants that flexibility. And for right now, you don't want to be one of those teams that's accused of being cheap. Certainly a big market team like the Phillies. So just spend the money. You have it. You have nothing else to do with it because you have a lot of young players. And very, very wise investment.
You look at the other starters in this rotation, guys like Velasquez and Eichhoff, and you're seeing, and you can even throw Zach Eflin in there as well, as Eflin has pitched very well since he came back up. You're seeing a lot of young guys who are learning how to pitch. Velasquez is learning not to just throw heat all the time. He's learning how to pitch. You're seeing Eichhoff, despite not getting much run support, he's learning to work through every situation. You're seeing Eflin make very good use of the pitches that he has. How encouraged are you about the development of the young pitchers?
I think the Phillies have done a really, really good job. One, in talent evaluation and trading for these players. I mean, the Phillies didn't really give up a lot to get these young players. Now, Eichhoff was not the centerpiece of the Cole Hamels deal, but he's certainly a very strong major league starter. When you think of the likes of Pivetta that you got for Jonathan Papelbon, of all people, who the Phillies were almost afraid was going to be stuck on the team for the following year and for another $12 million. They got Ben Lively for Marlon Byrd. Zach Eflin came over for Jimmy Rollins, one of his declining seasons, where he wasn't his old self. They did a really, really, really good job collecting these starters in trades. Now, it's pretty interesting how none of them really were homegrown Phillies except for Aaron Nola. So Velasquez, I think he's still got a ways to go to really maximize his potential. But the nice thing about this Phillies rotation is that they really developed them well in-house. They've gotten more in supply if they ever need to plug a hole. I mean, Aaron Nola going down a year ago would have been a total disaster. Right now, they've got Nick Pivetta to throw in, and guess what? If somebody else needs some help, they can go grab Ben Lively, or they can go grab Jake Thompson. So they've really established a really good amount of depth. The one thing about all this depth is I don't think they have one true ace. I think the Phillies management's ready to spend for that ace when it's time, or trade for that ace when it's time. But it's very, very comforting to know that each day when the team assembles, that you're not throwing Aaron Harang out there, or Jerome Williams out there, or Kevin Correa out there, or Chad Billingsley out there. I mean, I could go on from the names from the last few years. Nice, stable rotation. The coaching staff is doing a great job getting the best out of them, and it's really enviable position for the Phillies to be in.
You look around Philadelphia, Frank, the history of the Flyers is who's going to be the goaltender. In Philadelphia, it's who is going to be the number 2 to whoever the star player is. With the Phillies, it's who's the closer. And you look at the situation with Hector Neris, even though Pete McCann hasn't named him the closer, it's almost like they're just throwing him out there saying, all right, kids, sink or swim. Let's see what happens. Even though Benoit has a better ERA on the season, he has a better innings to strikeout ratio than Neris does. well, it's about the same strikeout to inning ratio. It just seems like the Phillies don't really know what they're doing with the closers. They're just saying, well, you know what, have at it. We're not really going to force a guy into a position of calling them a closer anymore.
Yeah, I think the issue with them not wanting to anoint Neris is if you kind of call him the closer right now, then you're almost like you're committing to him long term. I mean, the Phillies might want to go out and acquire one of those rock star closer types that's lights out. So they might not want to commit to that. In some ways, calling him the closer now, it affects his arbitration money when that kind of happens. And if they really don't intend to use him as the closer long term, then they'd have to pay him like a closer. So I think what the Phillies were trying to do is I think they felt they would get a little bit more out of Gomez, Jean-Marc Gomez, and I thought they felt that they were going to get a little bit more out of Benoit. I personally think that they hit the panic button too early on Benoit. The first night that Neris closed, I thought it was because the Phillies absolutely needed that win, and Pete Mackanin wanted to make sure he got that W. Unfortunately, it kind of put them in an awkward situation where now you're worried about who's going to close each day. Neris struggles a little bit. I mean, that was part of the issue, too, because if you put Neris in that position now and he struggles, then what? Well, guess what situation they're in right now?
That's the situation they're in now.
Yeah, then what? So I personally would have stuck it out with Benoit and not panicked after he had a bad outing or two, because it's really just that one blown save that he's had. And remember, in his setup role, you can get a blown save if you give up the lead, right? Yoeli Rodriguez got a blown save last night because he couldn't hold Eichhoff's runners on. So, that's an indication, too. You can look at that stat across all relievers. So yeah, I personally would recommend they just stick with Benoit, knowing full well that every closer is going to blow saves sometime, unless you're Brad Lidge in 2008, which is an anomaly, of course, right? Even Mario Rivera was good enough for a few blown saves every year. So don't hit the panic button, create some stability, and I think they'll be better off for it later. And you know what? Maybe if Neris just goes back to his eighth inning role, he'll feel more comfortable, because right now he does not seem comfortable to me. He seems agitated. A couple times where he's given up the lead, maybe it's because he's felt like he's had to strike the batter out, and when really he just needs to get the batter out. So maybe it wasn't the right time to put Neris in that situation. And my vote would be to just put the veteran Benoit in and say he's our closer going forward. Period. Set the bullpen accordingly. And meanwhile they have decent setup guys. Pat Neshek still hasn't given up a run. So there are some options. It's just right now it just seems like there's such consternation because they went to Neris and they don't know what to do.
He is Frank Klose of Sports Talk Philly. He's also our 97.3 ESPN.com Phillies Insider. You can follow him on Twitter at Frank Klose. Frank, appreciate the time as always on a Thursday.
Enjoyed it, Josh. Thank you.